Hi everyone, it's me David Chen here at my YouTube channel, and joining me today to talk about episode 2 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is streaming right now on Disney Plus. The episode is entitled The Star-Spangled Man, is Dan Gvozden from the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. Dan, how goes it this morning?
It's going pretty well this morning. Enjoying my weekend.
Well, excited to dive in with you to talk about this show. Now, one of the things I want to call out before we dive in is I would say that we are not necessarily what I would call a Marvel fan podcast or show, right?
Right.
And so there's definitely those out there in the world. Like if you're looking for someone who just loves all the Marvel stuff and is like, this is awesome and this is awesome, I don't think this is going to be that. This is going to be us kind of like talking about the show critically and skeptically as really two old cantankerous men. You know what I'm saying? And I just want people to be ready for that. So that's one thing I want to mention. But if you're curious what it is we do here on this YouTube channel and for this topic, basically every Saturday we gather together after the latest episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and we talk about it. We spoil everything. This is a YouTube-only show. There is no podcast, so it's just available here on my YouTube channel. So that is what is going on. We're going to be spoiling Season 1, Episode 2 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Star-Spangled Man. Let's get into it. Dan Gvozden, your overall thoughts on this episode of the show, I should say.
Well, I'm actually, to respond to your prelude there, I'm actually happy to be less cantankerous this episode. I thought that this episode delivered more of what you would expect from a so-called Captain America show. I thought that the plots kind of kicked into gear. Our main characters actually met each other, which I think is an important key element to the show, if the title gives you any indication. And, I felt like it abandoned all the stuff that you and I were kind of complaining about being, whether it be boring or maybe a little off topic from what you would want to see in a show like this.
Well, it's almost like having a show called The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You might want to have The Falcon and the Winter Soldier interact at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that definitely happened this episode.
Yeah, and I feel like that element, regardless of all the plot mechanics, like that core relationship between the characters is really what, carries the show. It's that classic Marvel banter. And, I think I've started seeing on the internet people being like, the banter is getting old. But for me, like, I think it's well written, especially for a TV show. And I just like this kind of core central relationship and how these characters push each other from kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. And I felt like we finally got all the core components here to make this into a TV show rather than just like part of a movie. It felt more episodic. We got a lot of different moving pieces that are, operating simultaneously. There's a rival. There's like a buddy cop humor. There's a mystery. There's like interesting background. And it felt to me like, okay, now I know what I'm tuning in for. I'm going to learn more about all of these things. And I would say of all the plots, like for the most part, I was interested in learning more about all of them. So, I think you're seeing a bit more of a like winning formula here.
This is so fascinating, Dan. I thought this episode was pretty rough, possibly even rougher than the first one, because of the velocity at which side plots and characters are being introduced right now. Like we'd already met a whole set of people in the first episode, right? And it's like, hey, guess what? Forget about Yori, Bucky's friend, and Unique, that guy in front of his thing, and forget about like Sam's sister and all those people. Like, here's a whole new set of people you need to learn about. And it's like, okay, now I don't even know who the show is going to be about for the rest of the, by the way, only 4 episodes that are left.
Yeah.
So I was not quite as positive as you on this one, but actually kind of negative on this episode. But it is nice that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier finally meet, so it does feel like very grounding that in the show called The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we are finally having scenes with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I do think it is a mess that like we met all those characters as you were saying, and then suddenly we've been shuffled off into like what feels like a completely different chessboard.
It is whiplash how different it is, in my opinion.
I think I just enjoyed this chessboard more than the last one.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
that's
like
fair enough.
I'm more interested in it. Yeah.
A couple of things I want to make sure we follow up on before we proceed further. A couple of follow-ups from the last episode. So the last one of these that we did, right? And I'll be putting all these into like a playlist, so you can access them on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Dave Chensky. That's Dave Chen SKY. One thing is I had mentioned last week about how like Marvel things generally haven't talked about race that much, and a couple of people pointed out like things like Black Panther tackled race in some ways. Luke Cage, although it's unclear whether that will be like that version of Luke Cage will be part of this MCU, right?
I have a feeling not.
Yeah.
Given that one of the villains in that TV show is now playing Blade.
I think that's very possible.
Yeah.
And so I think that certainly those are good call-outs. I would argue, and certainly we can see in this episode that like this show seems like much more interested in like what it means to be black in America and what it might mean to have a black Captain America. And so that's what it feels like the show is setting itself up to tackle. I don't actually know because the show seems like pretty all over the place at this point. But anyway, wanted to follow up on that topic. Did you have any sort of further thoughts, by the way, on the idea of whether or not Bucky like befriended that old man because he wanted to make amends, or if it was it was a coincidence? Some people actually chimed in. They're like, I think it was actually a coincidence. Like, I didn't know if you had any further thoughts on like Yori's storyline.
I saw those comments, and you know, you had me fully convinced that I was wrong by the end of the episode, and then to see other people chime in that they had the same experience as me. I mean, it may be that like I gave too much credit to the idea of like Bucky as this 100-and-something-year-old person and was making leaps and conclusions that the show didn't want me to make. Yeah. I honestly, I didn't rewatch the first episode. Maybe I should have, but you had me so convinced. I just chalked it up to the story wasn't entirely clear and in its storytelling, and that you know you can make a bunch of different assumptions based on how little we actually know about Bucky's life, right. You know, prior to him joining the war. There's a whole question in this episode about like, did Bucky receive a super soldier serum from Hydra? And you know, in the comics that is answered one way, and here it seems to be. I can't tell if it was answered. Even his time as Winter Soldier, I think it's still like a bit of a mystery that we're unraveling. So I think it's the thing I'm chalking it up to is the enigma of Bucky, and me wanting to give the show a little more credit than maybe it deserved, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still right.
But, yeah, no, I
wanted to check in with you about it. Which is like the point I was making last week was like the plot line behind Bucky and this old man is he befriended the old man because he wanted to like be friends with him and treat him well in order to make up for having murdered his son. One other thing I wanted to bring up, by the way, before we move on to this episode is like one of the comments last week was that we should treat Bucky as though like violence has been done to him. Like he was brainwashed this entire time. He wasn't under his own volition, right? Like Bucky, even though Bucky has been an assassin and murdered many people, it seems like most of it was against his will. Would you agree with that, at least as his character is portrayed in the MCU?
Yeah, I think that's a fair portrayal.
Like there's nothing that is wrong. He's not like morally deficient in his character. He just was forced to do horrible things against his will, basically.
Yeah, he was brainwashed, and we see him in you know, his time post Civil War, before he shows up in Infinity War, that Wakanda has helped him erase the programming that triggers him to become the Winter Soldier. So, I mean, I think he can still wrestle with how he feels about having his body used in that way, in the same way that, you know, perhaps we saw like in the Jessica Jones TV show. But it was not like a moral choice of his to become a assassin. Yeah.
So the other question you mentioned is like, does Bucky have the super soldier serum? And I think the answer has got to be yes.
Yeah.
Both because of what we've seen in Winter Soldier, the movie, and also Civil War, the movie. And we see him running as fast as a truck in this episode. So it just feels like maybe he doesn't have super soldier serum, but he's got something. right, going on.
It's at least, yeah. I mean, I think this would be a confirmation if it hadn't been confirmed prior. I mean, I think it's hard to tell because he's got the vibranium arm, which can make up a lot of
Right,
lost ground. And even here, we see him like jumping out of a plane and using the arm as the crutch for his landing. So
right.
you could maybe chalk it up to that, but I think the running thing for me is a clear giveaway that he has been enhanced in a number of ways that may not have been spelled out prior.
All right, so let's dive into this episode.
Can I address one
Oh
more
yeah,
thing?
please.
Yeah.
Any other follow up from last episode? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I saw some comments about, this show is going to really tackle what, I think what it's like, at least by this episode, like what it means to be black in America. And I know that like neither of us can truly speak for that experience.
Yep.
And I'll say this, David, if you want to bring on, another person to talk to about this, I'm more than happy to sit aside, as it may not be my conversation to engage in, but I'm going to do my best to try to speak honestly and what I can, offer up about what I know about that experience. But I in no way know that I would be a perfect stand-in to offer an experience on what it means to be black in America, which is a theme that I think the show is going to really try to tackle. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, like, I think Dave, you and I are going to try to do our best.
Understood and appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Also, Jeff Grubb's Game Mess says that they explicitly said they tested serum on him in the movies. So
Okay.
just another follow up to that point. But thanks for the correction. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. I agree. We are imperfect commentators. We will do the best we can. But let's dive into this episode. Episode 2, which is entitled The Star-Spangled Man. So we learn a lot more about John Walker in this episode. John Walker is the guy we saw at the end of the first episode who is the new Captain America. He's in a football locker room, and we don't know exactly what he's doing. Like, I thought this was like he's going to go out and be the guy we saw in the last scene in the last episode, but it looks like he's actually... maybe it is, but if I'm not mistaken, he's actually going out to be part of Good Morning America.
Yeah, and it seems to be at his. I think they explicitly say that it's at his high school that he graduated from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get a little bit of backstory about him and this woman he's with, and this dude Lamar Hoskins, aka Battlestar, which like I thought the whole Battlestar introduction was weird. Like, oh, I'm Battlestar. Like, people are going. Like, do people have like sidekick names that are relatively well known? Like, it does, anyway, it felt a little weird to me. But I will say one of the things I love, Dan Gvozden, I can't get enough of, is Marvel Studios logo set to different music than the normal Marvel Studios music. Like, they don't do it very often, but when they do it, I'm just like, oh man, this is super cool. Like, and in this case, I think it was a marching band remix of the Captain America music from the first Avenger movie, if I recall correctly. But yeah,
right, yeah, it's the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan, propaganda music from First Avenger, and that was even the name of this episode, right? It's Star-Spangled Man. So it was nice to kind of see that connection, and I thought it was really like visually dazzlingly performed and nice to hear, and
so good.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I started this episode like all in. I'm like, oh man, this is so cool. I just love when they play with like the Marvel Studios iconography, Yeah. So I was really into it. And then he does this interview with Good Morning America and talks a little bit about his background. And then you see he does not have super serum. But he's like, you know what's funny, by the way? I just watched this movie called MacGruber, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And they give this speech at the beginning of MacGruber where it's like they list MacGruber, for those who don't know, is one of the greatest movies of all time. And it's basically a parody of 80s action movies. And at the beginning, they do this scene where they like quote all of his commendations, and he's like, I'm going to quote from the MacGruber. He says, "The legendary MacGruber, former Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and Green Beret, served 6 tours in Desert Storm, 4 in Bosnia, 3 each in Angola, Somalia, Mozambique, Nicaragua, and Sierra Leone. Recipient of 16 Purple Hearts, 3 Congressional Medals of Honor, 7 Presidential Medals of Bravery, and starting tight end for the University of Texas, El Paso. End quote. And that is like a parody of what these are, and I could not help but think of that when they were talking about John Walker's background. It's like, you've got 3 Purple Hearts, served tours, and and it's just like, wow. This scene has already been parodied, basically. What did you think of this whole Good Morning America stuff?
I liked it, if only because I was very curious to see which direction they took the John Walker character, if they were going to make him like immediately an antagonist.
Because in the comics, he's very much like an antagonist / foil to either Falcon or Captain America, Steve Rogers, right? Like he's very like antagonist, right?
Well, it goes back and forth, but largely he begins that way. And here I thought like he was sympathetically portrayed, like as a guy who has served his country nobly, and I think it is portrayed in moments pretty humble about that service. And you can see him. He's kind of caught up in this, whether it's the military-industrial complex or whatever. He's clearly not on the level of Steve Rogers. Even just watching him, practice his lines in the locker room. There's no part of me that could imagine Steve Rogers practicing his lines. That kind of perfect Americanism just pours out of Chris Evans, I think. And so I don't know. I think the casting is really interesting. He's not a like perfectly handsome person, in the same way that like Chris Evans is. Like and the costume I think kind of is awkwardly fit on him for a reason. And so I kind of liked all of these different elements about him. Is like I felt sympathy for him, even if he may, as we see by the end of the episode, he slowly is kind of seemingly slipping into this antagonist or rival role. And I don't know, I just at that time, more than anything, I was soaking up the details about him because I was interested in him as a character, and I appreciated seeing the clips of him like throwing the shield and, just kind of getting some backstory about who this, new version of John Walker was.
The shield thing is interesting because basically the only way you can make the shield look badass is by having it defy the laws of physics, I think. But that was true starting with Captain America Winter Soldier. That's when we really started seeing, or arguably the first Avenger, right? That's when we really started seeing like how useful the shield could be in like hand-to-hand combat situation. It was interesting to see him train with it though. But it also makes me feel like, and he was training with the shield. Am I right about that? Like I did see footage of him training with the shield.
Yeah, he throws it at like multiple targets.
So I'm like, how much time has elapsed since Sam gave the shield to the Smithsonian to then when he's going out on stage to Good Morning America? Or how much time has elapsed since the end of the last episode in this episode?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's like, when did he have the shield to train with? Anyway.
I also thought the line that he says, even though I never met him, he feels like a brother. Mm-hmm. It's like, you can see for me that's like the first point where he crosses the line. He is taking ownership over something that he has no right to claim. He is no friend of Steve's, even if he modeled himself after him, and it crosses into creepy. And I think the reaction from Sam and Bucky in his still empty furnitureless room. So right. Even if it is months later, he still has not gotten around to furnishing his apartment. He's very angry. He's seemingly furious at this. Yeah.
And I think you point to some interesting facts about John Walker's as a character is like, I don't know how we're supposed to feel about him. You know what I mean? Also, by the way, Hamstrung in the chat room is bringing up the idea that they must have multiple shields. Like the shield has been broken multiple times, so like maybe there are like different versions of it. Yeah, which is a great point because we do see it shattered at the end of Endgame, but then obviously they reconstruct it. Although when Steve Rogers gives him the shield at the end, I wonder which shield that is. Maybe it's one he got from his past. Anyway, whatever. I'm not going to think about the.
Well, now that they have an open relationship with Wakanda, maybe they've got vibranium on tap.
Right. Yeah. Maybe they can just make it at any time they want. So.
Yeah.
DN Williams, by the way, saying, I thought that was well handled. It's totally the kind of thing some people say when they're following in a dead person's footsteps. I think I thought as a kind of PR exercise, like as a depiction of PR exercise, I thought the show nailed it. Like in terms of like, oh, this is exactly how this kind of interview would go. And John Walker's actually doing a relatively good job of playing this role. I'm unsure of how we're supposed to feel about John Walker because he seems like a decent fellow, to be honest with me. Maybe flawed in many ways. But I think a lot of people watch this, from what I could tell on the internet, and they're like, this guy is a raging asshole. And I'm like, I mean, he's kind of a dick, but like, no more than. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, I'm not sure if we're supposed to think he's like a raging asshole or if he's like definitely the enemy and we should sympathize with Bucky and hate this guy. Like, do you have any thoughts on that at this point?
I wonder if some of those people are bringing baggage to their reading of
That's
this.
what I'm thinking too, right? Is
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, or just like the very nature that it's not Sam might get people angry just for the fact that Sam, is the one that we want to root for to be Captain America. But I think that's what I liked about it was I was sympathetic towards the guy. Like I don't think he understands the true context of what he's doing. And I guess in his eyes, Sam truly did give up the shield. So why not,
Right.
take it up? And
Right.
and I think the inclusion of Battlestar is interesting as almost like a true parallel between Bucky and Sam. You've got this almost like a flipped role. You've got, Battlestar, in the kind of like wingman role, which is a line that I'm going to call him John Walker says later, where he says like, if only I could get Captain America's wingman on board, and it's just full of cringe. And the guy is he's just short-sighted and kind of has like a narrow vision, but I don't think he's a bad guy.
That's the thing. He's not like a bad person. I'm not like rooting against him or anything like that. And maybe I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, that's my read is that like you see him as like a rival, like a cop from another district, but their goal is ultimately the same.
So Sam meets up with Bucky in a hangar because they're going on some mission. This was a weird scene, I thought, because basically this is the first time that the Falcon and Winter Soldier meet, and it basically is given no fanfare whatsoever. Like they're just like, oh hey, it's like it's given the significance of someone bumping into someone else in a hallway, basically.
It is weird, and it asks a lot of questions about like how people regard Winter Soldier. Like I thought he was trying to lay low, but here he is kind of like stumbling into military bases.
Yeah. Well, and he's going on this mission too. So
yeah, whether officially or unofficially, but they do let him on the plane. So like, I guess they're okay with it.
He's coordinating with military missions, basically, is what's happening with Winter Soldier. Maybe it's part of a condition of his pardon. Is you got to go into other countries and steal stuff, and also, by the way, you best not miss your court mandated appointments.
Yeah, or the Baltimore Police Department are going to come after you.
Yeah. Anything else so they bring up the idea of like androids, aliens, and wizards are the big three enemies that people face. And I thought that, very clever, but also often the most threatening enemy, Dan, is humankind itself. Do you not agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
the biggest enemy is within us.
Sometimes. Yes, I was just going to get there. The opposite of the friends we made along the way is the enemy within.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on this scene? The scene of them interacting for the first time. It's kind of trying to set up their relationship. Like this episode, rather clunkily, in my opinion, needs to set up the idea that they are like against each other so that when they finally bond at the end, it can be like this catharsis of like, oh, they've come all this way. What I like about the idea of the show is that it's like, hey, what if we took these two characters who basically had no personality except as sidekicks for other characters or another character, in this case, Captain America, and fleshed out their backstory and gave them a relationship. Like, I like that idea. And I thought that was done really well in WandaVision. Like, we knew nothing about those people, and we gave them a backstory. The problem with this show, I think, is that I just don't think these two people have as much chemistry as Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. But I'm curious, like, what you think of their banter. Do you find it to be convincing? Do you like their chemistry? Do you enjoy this relationship?
I don't think that like in terms of actors that they're on quite the same level, at least in my interpretation. For me, Sebastian Stan is really kind of like leading the pack here, and when he's kind of dominating the scene, I think I buy into it more, which is funny because I think about the banter in the Hurt Locker and how much it's led by Anthony Mackie
Yeah.
in that movie, but for some reason his stuff is just not working as well for me here.
Yeah.
Although I do in the end like the banter. I think it is clever. I think the Hobbit stuff was really funny. It's more the scenarios where we're getting the banter that I don't quite buy. Whether it be here in a random meetup in a hangar or in a like weird couples therapy thing that I'm not sure why is happening, or while they're walking down the road together when one of them has a jetpack with wings and the other one can run at super speeds. Like it just feels like these are manufactured scenarios for them to make jokes. But in other instances, it works. Like when they're breaking into the building to spy on the Flag Smashers, which we're going to get to in a second. Like some of that banter around Red Wing, I thought was clever. So it works for me in like fits and bursts.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of, some of it is decent and some of it is like pretty rough in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Okay, so a massive action scene ensues, where they're kind of looking up what's going on with the Flag Smashers. There's like vaccines, very relevant to what we're going through. And then
It immediately plucked at my heartstrings. I was like,
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
And then they kind of attack there's this big attack on these two trucks that are moving. This is a hugely ambitious action scene, right? Like just to stage it, to execute it is hugely ambitious. I appreciate the ambition. I didn't think it quite hit the mark in the same way that the first action scene from the first episode did. It just looked like much more like, oh, these are people on a green screen. I think Falcon, a lot of his movements don't. A lot of times when I see Falcon like flying through things, it feels a little weightless to me. It doesn't feel like that's a guy with actual wings. It feels like, oh, this is a CGI character in a computer. That's usually what I'm thinking when I'm seeing Falcon. And I think that was heavily on display in this scene. But that said, curious how you felt about this action scene.
Well, in regards to Falcon's movements, I mostly agree with you, but then there's moments where like he throws himself off of the truck and then extends his wings and gets caught in the drag.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
That stuff all works for me.
Yeah.
And like him swooping under the bottom of the truck as well works for me. For me, it was that there were a lot, like maybe too many moving pieces going on here.
Like people just appearing out of nowhere. Like, oh, when did those guys get? When did those henchmen appear? There? Oh, there's a car behind him. But my favorite thing is what JC Mellon points out in the chat. He says, the second driver was seemingly cool with just Bucky jumping on the truck. What?
Yeah.
That was so weird. It was so weird. Like, Bucky like runs up, jumps on, rips open the back of the truck, goes in, and the second truck is just cool. They're not like honking. They're not doing anything. It's weird. It's weird.
But there are a lot of cool moments. I love the at this point in time, the unknown girl seeming leader of the Flag Smashers that is like that jumps into the air and breaks Red Wing. I thought that was a cool moment. With that, I just had a good joke afterwards cool. Where Bucky's like, "I feel the same way." I thought that was funny. But yeah, I mean, in terms of direct comparison for the scene, I don't think this scene was as thrilling as the like Mad Max style scene like this from The Mandalorian. If you think about that penultimate episode where they're dressed as stormtroopers and trying to break into the Imperial base, like for me, that action set piece was more deftly handled from a directorial standpoint and geography and how the scene was constructed.
Alex Nunez says, weird for sure, but I guess it makes sense because it ended up being a trap. Not sure I buy that logic, but anyway, so they get in trouble, and then Captain America shows up and is like with Battlestar, and they help him out. And you see that Captain America, he knows how to handle himself as well. You see Captain America use a gun, which Captain America has never used in the movies until this point, right? And I don't think, right? I think he's always been the shield dude.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think so, but I seem to have some memories of him like taking guns from villains, but I'm not entirely sure.
Right. But it's very rare. Like it was a
Sure.
shocking moment when you see Captain America take a gun and shoot a dude. In
Yeah,
my
no,
opinion.
100%. Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, I'm curious, like, what this show will have to say about the iconography of Captain America. Like, is it going to say, like, hey, America being a fundamentally, like, imperialist country that goes around imposing its military will around the world, like, is it going to have anything interesting to say about that? And maybe I'm curious if the show will in some way be a repudiation of the idea of Captain America via the character of John Walker. I am curious about that. Curious where that's going.
I'm curious, I think they're already setting up some of these things like, the Flag Smashers themselves, as bad, so to speak, as they seem, their goal is one that I think anybody could kind of relate to, which is that they seem to be distributing medicine and vaccines, explicitly stated in this episode, to incomes or areas of like great disparity in terms of how the blip affected them, and this kind of like restoring the world to this non-dictatorial era where humanity was united for a cause. Maybe their methods aren't great, although I'm not that disturbed by what they've been doing so far. So I wonder if that's, ultimately, Captain America is going to be challenged by America's role in the new world order.
I think what you're saying is
we'll see.
hashtag Flag Smashers were right.
Yes, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's curious to see how it'll play that out. Also, by the way, people are saying that he did use guns in the first Avenger. He fires lots of guns. He did in the war montage. Okay, so he does use weapons, but it doesn't seem like he's. I don't think starting Winter Soldier, I don't recall him using guns. Maybe he did, but like, to me, whether or not it was right for me to react that way, it was shocking to see John Walker fire a gun and basically kill a dude as Captain America.
More or less shocking than seeing Sam shoot a bomb at a helicopter and blow up people.
Roughly the same amount of shocking.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, they're killing dudes. Jeff Grubbs says, like, Flag Smashers are clearly not the real bad guys, which isn't surprising.
Right.
And so the question for me just is, like, to what degree does John Walker, like, fit in with this, right? Like, is he going to be part of the quote-unquote bad establishment? Is he going to join up with Falcon and Winter Soldier? So curious. Okay, so then they have the action scene, and kind of Captain America comes in and saves them. And I guess my whole question while watching this was, if they knew about this, if, like, the military knew about this, why didn't they send in Captain America in the first place? Like, why did they... Anyway.
We had to wait for the action scene.
It just is weird. They're like, okay, and by the way, these guys are probably going to get in trouble. That's when we drop you in. You come in and save them. Which, like, would have been interesting if they were, like, doing it for propaganda purposes. Like, and then you find out, oh, they're being filmed the whole time, but then, nope, that's not it. It's just like, oh, we just decided to send people in two waves. So anyway.
I'm not as bothered by it because they explicitly say they're following Red Wing, and maybe they felt like they had a handle on it, and then they lost the footage from Red Wing, so they're like, okay, well, now we need to send guys in directly. If I'm gonna no prize my way to a solution there.
Was it explained why they only send in two dudes in there in the first place, though?
No, you'd think they'd have more of a battalion ready to go, or at least they could set a barricade up on the road.
You send in one really badass guy and then the super soldier guy, and it's like, okay, that should be enough. But no need for Captain America to go in there. Whatever. It's a very extremely minor nit. Extremely minor nit. So, okay. So then Sam and Bucky, they like they exit the action scene basically, and then they're like walking down the road, and then John Walker comes along and is like, guys, let's be friends. Can't we be friends? And this is an interesting conversation because you see how icy cold Bucky is to John Walker.
Yeah.
And John Walker is kind of behaving like a dick in this scene. He's like, hey, like, excuse me, like, Red Wing is government property, and, like, we're basically the government, so, duh. And it's just like, okay.
I like that. He's kind of just like your typical military brat, or
Yeah,
if you will,
yeah.
and like that's a believable character to me. It's like, oh, this guy's not bad. He's just part of a system.
And yeah, that's exactly right. He doesn't seem like a bad dude. He's just like, come join us. And yeah. Also, in the show notes, you point out like the Global Repatriation Council is helping to rebuild the world order, right? That is revealed during the course of this episode. Yes.
Right. Yeah. But according to who? Whose world order?
Yeah.
Like, I think there might be more to the Global Repatriation Council than we know at this point.
Very dystopian name, by the way. Global Repatriation Council. If you want to name a thing to rebuild the world order, maybe give it a less like Illuminati-esque sounding name.
Right. There's got to be more to that. I mean, they've got posters for this thing all over the place on this show. Like, we can get to theories and stuff at the end, but I do think that there's something a little more devious going on with that council than we currently know.
Let's talk about the stuff that happens to the Flag Smashers in Slovakia. There's a whole sequence of the Flag Smashers. We meet Carly Morgenthau, who's like a gender flipped person from the comics. He was Carl Morgenthau in the comics. Tell us what your impressions were of Carly Morgenthau in this episode and what we should think about her, or what you think about her.
It's hard to really say. I mean, she's got very few lines to kind of go off of. I think the casting is maybe the most interesting thing about her, is that like she seems to be this very young girl and all these people are following her. So I'm immediately intrigued to what her backstory is, because how does a child gain that kind of power over groups of men in the way that she has?
Right.
And I wonder if
she's played by Erin Kellyman, and is 22 years old in real life.
Right.
So, yeah.
But I think maybe coded younger on the show. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's right. Could be.
There's this interesting image of like a bloody handprint that shows up for the Flag Smashers on their masks and stuff, and I wonder if there's a backstory to that might be related to her backstory in some way. She's got this kind of phrase the Flag Smashers keep repeating: "One world, one people," which reminds me of the cue "Where we go one, we go all."
But not evil in this instance, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what we suspect. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to disparage the Flag Smashers by
How dare you associate the Flag Smashers? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have much more to state. I mean, it's interesting, this headquarters they go to. They seem pretty decently outfit, and the guy that's introducing them is like a Flag Smasher fanboy of some sort. But and they refer to themselves as a sort of rebellion, and it seems to have that kind of scrappy attitude that you like associate with like rebellions in movies and things like that. And so I mean, I think it's easy to see that they're coded as the villains, but not really.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Just to play out the rest of that storyline, right? Basically, there's another antagonist, the Power Brokers as well, right? Like the Power Broker, I should say. And then the Power Brokers men show up, and then the Flag Smashers like, oh my gosh, the Power Brokers are here. We got a GTFO, right? And then one of the soldiers hops in and is able to delay them. Like it seems, by the way, like many of the Flag Smashers we pointed out are like super soldiers, right? They have the super serum,
right?
And one of the theories online is that like the Flag Smashers are trying to get the super serum out to everyone. Like there was a theory that like we have this serum, we're trying to like get it out to everyone so everyone can be super, so that not one place can have all the power. We'll see if that ends up being true. I don't think that's explicitly stated in this episode, right?
Yeah, but the vaccines, I don't think it's too much of a line to draw. Like, oh, there's a bunch of needles with liquids in it. What could that possibly be?
And there's a bunch of super soldiers who want to like restore the world order in a different way. What could they possibly be up to, right?
Yeah. Right, and I think that is where you can bring in like John Walker, who right now has no powers, but like to what lengths would he be willing to go to emulate his idol Captain America and need to power himself up? And if I can skip ahead to my like kind of theorizing, is I do think the Power Brokers and the Global Repatriation Council maybe more closely knit than we think. As we don't have an idea of what the power
Yeah.
broker is, other than like these cars and this threatening text message. But the power brokers people are wearing suits and they pull up in like a fleet of cars. To me, it suggests some kind of government connection.
Yeah.
And you're right. You're getting right at it, which is, they're rebuilding the world order, but whose world order? And that's a classic Captain America story, whether it's Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever, Anyway, that's where I think this is likely headed.
Niwona in the chat room says, Home Dude definitely could have knocked down some of the poles to stall them and get back with his friends instead of wildly charging and getting shot for no reason, LOL.
Yeah,
Which,
that's fair.
I don't think is unfair. So, okay. So your theory also is like they stole the serum from the power broker, and like that's why they're on the run, and they're going to try to spread the serum to everyone else. Now the thing about this is the Incredibles, I think, at its core. Okay, sorry, why am I bringing up the Incredibles? A lot of people are comparing this plan to Syndrome's plan, right? In the Incredibles, Syndrome was like, everyone's going to be super. I'm going to give away all my gifts to the world, so everyone can be super, like me and you guys. In putting Syndrome as the villain, I think The Incredibles is fundamentally a very conservative film, a very like libertarian film. It's very much like the successful people should be allowed to succeed and no one else. Like
Right.
The superpowered in society should be superpowered and we should worship them and admire them, and no one else can be that way, right? And I am curious what this show is going to have to say. So first of all, I'll point out that not everyone agrees with my interpretation of The Incredibles. And certainly a lot of people find the very ending of that movie where Dash is like running but like not too fast to be kind of a balance of the two things. But I have always found it to be like fundamentally like conservative libertarian ideology. And I am curious, in positioning the Flag Smashers as the Syndrome-like character, what position this show will ultimately end up taking.
Well, there is the whole idea of like the fascism of superheroes, like the very idea that like powered people get to supersede law enforcement and laws in order to enact justice according to them. And, and Marvel has dealt with this in the movies. Like Civil War is essentially all about that and putting people in two different camps and whether they should register to be a part of the military or not. And you've already kind of got some of that building up here where you have Sam Wilson saying, we're freelancers. We have a little bit more leeway than you guys do. So we're going to go do our own thing. And the appropriateness of that is maybe going to be drawn into question, like their role. And, but on the other hand, you've got, if everybody can become a super soldier, you've got like a global arms race, or like a, and now everybody has nukes, and does that make the world safer? And who should have the power over the keys to super, powered humans? I wonder if maybe the solution is to just get rid of them altogether, but that's obviously not going to be the case because we're tuning in for superhero stuff.
Right. Hamstrung in the chat and other people are saying, like, is John Walker a super soldier? Because, like, if not, how is he fighting against super soldiers? He claims to not be a super soldier.
I believe that he's not. I think he had his ass pretty much handed to him in the fight. At least that's my read.
Yeah. Okay. So that's basically what happens with the Flag Smashers and the Power Broker and all that stuff in Slovakia. Couple final scenes with Bucky and Falcon. First of all, they go to Baltimore, Maryland,
my hometown,
and they meet Isaiah Bradley, played by Mantis himself, Carl Lumbly. Always great to see Carl Lumbly in anything. He's a really talented actor. And tell us about what's going on with Isaiah Bradley as played by Carl Lumbly. What is happening in this scene? Why is it significant in your opinion?
Well, I was so excited when I saw this for the first time. This is one of those kind of beloved storylines from the comics from like real serious Marvel fans. It's a story from a book called Truth, Red, White, and Black. And for all the implications the story has, it's a story that's not really been in print, although it is referenced all the time. And so this is like one of those kind of hidden gems of the Marvel Comics catalog. And it's a story about how after Captain America was lost, frozen in ice, well, I guess unbeknownst to the American government who thought he was dead, they decided that they wanted to, you know, go after the super soldier serum again, but they didn't have Dr. Erskine. So they created this program called Project Rebirth. And they basically, well, they say they enlisted 300 black soldiers from Mississippi, but really they were kind of kidnapped and forced into trials for this a new super soldier serum. And every single one of them died except for Isaiah Bradley, who became like the new secret Captain America, who the government sent to wars around the globe, including like Korea and I believe Vietnam. And we get references to that here when they meet up that Bucky and Isaiah have confronted each other before. But it's kind of one of those stories that really directly confronts race in the Marvel universe in I think a really insightful and interesting way. And it's based on reality, where the American government did do experiments on gas masks on black soldiers and killed a great number of military men, just under the pretense that they were disposable. And this is the same here. And so it's got like a historical significance, and seeing them directly bring that character into this world for me was thrilling, because it opens up a chapter to explore, about like American exceptionalism and, the role of race in America. And to see that character show up, like I said, I hope they do more with him. Like, I hope this is just the introduction of him, and that we continue to do that character justice, because it is an interesting lens via which to observe race and Captain America's connection to race in America's history.
Thanks for that background, Dan. Really, really fascinating. So it kind of provides more information to Falcon and Winter Soldier about some of the history of like these experiments that have been done, and I guess kind of paves the way for this theory about this, like that the super serum is kind of going to be the MacGuffin of this season. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think also showing like the damaging effect that it can have on people if one, not perfected, and two, if the people are truly subjected to like the government's whims. Like here, Isaiah Bradley says he was locked in prison for 30 years because he was truly seen, I think, as like just a weapon or tool by the government that they can control and then hide. And to me, it's really no different than the Winter Soldier initiative, in that Bucky was just utilized for his skills rather than any kind of humanity that he has. And I'm interested to see, those characters reconnect, but also maybe realize they're not quite so different from one another at the end of the day.
George Jones in the chat says, I've got to find a way to read this. Do you have any tips on like if someone wants to find how to read this, what they should do?
I believe I don't know if it's actually available to purchase digitally. I would imagine that it is. There's a service called Marvel Unlimited, which it's like a monthly service that has almost entirely the full Marvel catalog on it, like over 60 some years of comics. But they're slowly adding to it. I need to check and see if it's on there. I own a copy, so I just read my own things to refresh. But you can go on, there's sites like mycomicshop.com, which will sell individual issues or collections. So I would advise you just go online and see where you can find it. I mean, there's enough copies of it that it's not a true rarity. Although I imagine after this week, the price of it shot up considerably. And it's a really interesting book in that the artwork is very different than what you might expect from like a typical like house style Marvel comic. It's more cartoonish and exaggerated, but I think, it's a black artist really kind of, expressing a full range of emotions on the page. And I think a book, if you're interested in this kind of thing and how comics can reflect society, I would really check it out. So I don't know. You can also message me on Twitter.
And what is the name of it again, Dan? Just so people know.
It's called Truth, Red, White, and Black.
All right.
And it's a mini series, and You can also just reach out to me on Twitter, and I'll try to give you some links to see where you can find it.
So after this scene, Bucky and Falcon leave, and Falcon gets racially profiled outside of Isaiah Bradley's home. They're starting a fight, and then like these cops stop and start hassling them. And between the scene of Sam failing to get a loan last week and then getting racially profiled this week, it feels like, oh, maybe this is the Marvel show that's going to actually try to say something about being black in America. And I'm kind of curious to see how far it's going to take it, or if it's just going to like refer to these things. The Marvel movies are in general, please tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but in general, fairly deferential to law enforcement and military, I would say, because many of them are made with the cooperation of said institutions. And so this is like the first time, I think, and I could be wrong, so let me know if I'm wrong, and I'll correct it in the next one. Or in the chat, that would be great. Then I don't need to correct it in the next one. But I think this is the first time when like they've ever showed police in like with this kind of like racial tinge of like, hey, maybe not all police are completely above board, and maybe some of them do racially profile. I think so anyway, and that's I haven't seen that in a Marvel thing before. Any thoughts?
I can't think of another scenario where that would have come up in quite the same way. I mean, this show seems to be positioning itself to, comment on it. I mean, I guess maybe you could have found a way to do it in Black Panther. I mean, there's the interesting museum scene,
right,
where they're talking about like, stolen artifacts and things like that kind of positions, whatever government, in a bad light. But yeah, nothing quite as direct as this.
So in your notes, Dan, you write that Bucky is under arrest for missing his court-appointed therapy, and then in parentheses you say, how does the BCPD have jurisdiction for this? The Baltimore Police Department have jurisdiction. At the beginning of every episode of the popular improv show Whose Line Is It Anyway, Drew Carey would say, welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the rules are made up and the points don't matter. That's basically how I felt about the second half of this episode. It's like, none of this is all just, they're just making up the rules as they go along, basically. Like, Baltimore police taking them in, and the therapist is there, and she gets to conduct an extemporaneous therapy session with two of them. Why not? Okay, sure. This is necessary, and she's gonna borrow an interrogation room to do. It's just like, whatever. Okay, I'm gonna stop trying to fit this into my rubric of what real life is, and just like let this play out as the extreme silliness that it is. But any thoughts on this whole therapy stuff, like all this whole final sequence that takes us to the end of the episode?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the banter again was like enjoyable, even if I found the scenario implausible. But it does have that kind of feeling of kind of sloppy improv. Like the kind of like, oh no, we're two guys who are crossing our legs and feeling uncomfortable with each other kind of thing. I don't know. From two military guys, it does seem a little strange that they're like in close comfort with another man. They feel a little bit uncomfortable, in that like soldiers of their level would really have had to do a lot of like trust exercises and things like that. But I didn't mind it, even if I found it like preposterous in the way that you're describing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. It was preposterous, but like whatever. I understand what it's trying to do. It probably went on about 5 minutes too long than I thought it should have. But yeah, they're really trying to establish this relationship, establish them as being very like antagonistic against each other. I get what they're trying to do. I think the execution was a little bit lacking for me, but whatever.
Can I rewind just one second? So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that when they go to Isaiah Bradley's place, his grandson is there. And in the comics, his grandson is Elijah Bradley, who ends up becoming the Patriot, a member of the Young Avengers. He gets into an accident and gets just like She-Hulk, he gets a blood transfusion from Elijah and suddenly is super powered, which if only the government realized they didn't need to create a super soldier serum, they could just do blood transfusions for everybody. So he becomes the Patriot and is a member of the Young Avengers. And they, these shows and stuff have been really setting up the Young Avengers. You've got, Wanda's kids
Wanda's
from
kids.
WandaVision. If an adapted crew list of the Young Avengers, you've got, the upcoming, Kate Bishop Hawkeye series. We're getting this kind of next generation of young heroes, and to me, it seems very clear that they're moving in the direction of establishing the Young Avengers. And so I would put a pin on like this actor playing Elijah Bradley to become a much larger figure, a cameo here, but perhaps a big figure in the future of these shows.
Santiago 3J1 says, I do like the continuity that Falcon knows about therapy techniques since we've seen him running the veteran support group.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Pretty cool reference, yeah. So then they go outside the station after the interrogation/therapy appointment, and they meet up with the new Captain America, John Walker, and Battlestar, and it's like a fairly contentious conversation. It's like, hey, you better get on board or get out of my way, is kind of where it ends up as. So we'll see. There's a lot of pieces on the chessboard, Dan, and I just don't... I'm just not optimistic it's all going to pay off in 4 episodes. Like, if this was like a 13-episode season, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. Like, you're introducing like 15 characters, and like, we're going to get to see how each... But there's like literally less than 4 hours left of this thing, right? Like, every episode so far has been like 50 minutes.
And I just want to know whether or not he can save that boat.
They didn't even refer to it at a single time this episode. What is happening?
I also want to know whether or not he gave food poisoning to all those people from leaving the food in the truck bed all that time.
This episode feels like it's from a completely different show than last episode. Like, It just is like, oh, all that stuff we set up, like, forget about it. We're doing a whole different thing now. Like, who knows? I'm lost.
Is that woman still waiting for Bucky to return from his date? Like, she's like still sitting there like, no, he's coming back. Don't bring me the check yet.
He's coming back. I know he left all of a sudden. He probably just had a bathroom emergency or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, are we ever going to return to those characters? Like, who knows? Who knows? We'll see. It's just so weird that it seems to be setting up enough pieces for like a 10 to 13 episode arc, and it's going to be over in 4 more episodes. Like, I don't have faith that they're going to pay everything off, but I kind of was worried about Damon Lindelof's Watchmen as well. Like, oh, this show is so short. How is it going to pay everything off? And it ended pretty well. So I'm like, maybe this show can do the same thing.
Yeah.
Hamstrung is saying, I'm sitting here thinking, what boat? LOL. You and most of the audience by the end of this show, I dare say. Like, that's the thing is, you set up this whole conflict of Sam needs money, and then they didn't even refer to it this episode, right? It's not even like, hey, what about the boat? Like, I don't even think they refer to it. Is that right?
I don't think it's ever mentioned in this episode. Maybe he'll get a medal at the end of all this, or he'll take the Captain America shield, melt it down, and sell off some of that vibranium for some money, and that'll be the end of it. You got your boat, sister.
Final sequence of the movie is we find out who they need to talk to next. And can you? How did they make this connection again, Dan? Can you reiterate for us?
I wish I could, David, because I rewound this scene 3 times to watch it. There is some verbal gymnastics that go on here. Something about Isaiah Bradley mentioning Hydra, or like, his people, the Winter Soldier's people, Hydra. So for some reason, they need to go talk to Zemo, who knows everything about Hydra. And to me, this was like, I'm excited to see Zemo because I like that character a lot, but like, I could not square what that has anything to do with what we're currently experiencing. Like, they're going to go to Zemo and be like, hey, can you help us out? And he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, see you later.
J.C. Mellon says, the Geneva Convention stipulates that any incarcerated evil genius be provided with a chess set and a copy of Now That's What I Call Classical Requiems.
I was going to say he got a Magneto introduction, right? Yeah.
It kind of reminds me, what you're saying kind of reminds me of the scene in Tenet. Do you see the Christopher Nolan movie Tenet?
Of course, yeah.
Where at one point they go to India, I think, and it's like, hey, these weapons we found come from India, and if it's India, it means you know about it.
It must
It's
be
like,
you. Yeah.
it's like, dude, India has what over 1 billion people in it, but if it has this kind of rare earth metal, it's got to be you. You're the only person in India that knows about this. Same thing about Zemo.
I mean, am I crazy? Like, I thought Zemo was like kind of a rogue actor. Like, he didn't seem like a guy that was really infiltrated Hydra or was like, using their forces in any way. He was a guy whose family was killed by the Winter Soldier, and I maybe I'm forgetting the details of that, but like in the comics, yes, he's very much linked to Hydra, but I more got the sense that this was a guy on a personal vendetta rather than some like scheming world,
Sebastian points
or...
out that like Hydra knows about super soldier serums, and Zemo specifically researched that.
That's true, I guess.
And also in Civil War, Zemo's plan, I'm quoting from Santiago, was specifically around tracking down Hydra super soldiers and killing them, right?
That's true.
That was the big reveal of Civil War, was you're like, oh my gosh, he's putting together, and this was really cool, this idea that he's putting together this team that could literally murder anyone. That was like his whole thing. But then you find out at the end, actually, he hates these people and he wants to destroy them. Right.
So maybe that's the connection, is that he knows about the creation of this new serum in some way and can help them track it back to the power.
He knows about the serum. He wants to stop the serum from getting out into the world. Like, in some way, he is going to be like an antagonist of the serum, right? Which means he might be an antagonist of the Flag Smashers, right?
Right. I see a team up in our cards here.
Right. It's going to be about Zemo and Falcon and Winter Soldier teaming up against Flag Smashers. Then Falcon and Winter Soldier realizing Flag Smashers are actually good. And then Zemo switching sides and teaming up with John Walker and Battlestar going up against Falcon and Winter Soldier.
That sounds entirely plausible.
Any closing thoughts on this episode?
This
has been great. This has been super fun, by the way, having all the chat people put into the comments. We really appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Go ahead, closing thoughts, Dan. Well, and I'll throw up our URLs while you're sharing closing thoughts here.
Oh, great. Well, I think that's just it. Is like as scatterbrained as elements of this episode seem, I think we could have much deeper conversations about what's going on in this episode and where it might be headed, and that has me way more intrigued than the first episode, where I think like the internet conversation basically died the minute it came out, and I think this at least like lives up to the potential of asking me questions, getting me invested in characters and scenarios. Even if it's just the introduction of some kind of mystery, I can see all of these moving pieces. And I'm not just talking about the chessboard at the end.
The chessboard is a commentary on the show itself.
Yes, a very subtle metaphor, but and the role that Zemo will be playing as the chess master. Ooh, but at the very least, like to me, like thrilling. Maybe not the best action scene ever, but like several sequences that were fun to watch, and at least from an action standpoint, some jokes that connected. And, a bunch of threads that like seem to tie together, at least you and I could do the work to put them together. And I don't think that the writers are going to be too far behind us, so to speak.
All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to get more stuff like this, see my Snyder Cut review and other stuff like that, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the notification button so you get notified whenever I go live, whenever I publish a new video. We're going to be doing this every week to talk about Falcon and Winter Soldier. And maybe I will do stuff like this beyond this week, if this show, if it goes well. But Dan, tell people where they can find more of your stuff.
Yeah, sure. I host a podcast called The Amazing Spider Talk, and it's all about Spider-Man as a transmedia property, whether that be the TV shows, the movies, the comics, everything. We're kind of working our way chronologically through the character's takeover of pop culture. And this week, we're having on the show one of the biggest comic artists of all time. It's John Romita Jr., who actually had a fairly substantial run on Captain America right before Sam Wilson took over the Shield. And that run aged, Steve up to be the old man that you saw in Endgame. So if you are, if you've ever heard of John Romita Jr. Or are curious about, his work, come on over and check out our show. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys there.
Great. Thanks so much for joining me today, Dan. Thanks you all for watching this, listening to this. And yeah, we'll be doing this every week after the latest episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. And hopefully I'll be less cranky next time.
Okay.